Welcome to Startup Canada Live, Startup Foundations. Today is Thursday, June 29th, and my name is AQEELA, and my goal is to build a more innovative and entrepreneurial startup ecosystem in Canada, and that's why I volunteer for Startup Canada. Startup Canada is the national rallying organization and community and voice for Canada's entrepreneurs and entrepreneur community.
Hi everyone, my name is MIDIA SHIKH, and I'm the co-founder and the CEO of CANNYVISION. I volunteer with Startup Canada because it offers many entrepreneurs good resources and ability to start their businesses. We are your hosts today. We're podcasting live from Startup Canada's national offices, from cubicles, co-working spaces, incubators, and startup community.
Every Thursday on Startup Canada Live, we discuss topics relevant to Canadian startup, scale-up, and small business community. We feature expert guests to provide insights into funding, growing, and scaling successful ventures. Startup Canada Live is streamed through Periscope and Facebook Live for easy viewing, wherever you are, via our good friends at restream.io. Startup Canada Live is brought to you by Intuit Books, Canada's leading provider of business, financial, and tax management solutions for SMEs, and by Mastercard. Whether you need a card for purchases or you need payment solutions to help you better manage and track expenses, Mastercard has the right solution for your small business.
Today's topic in Startup Live is, so you run out of money, what to do next? We're joined by two very special guests. Our first guest is joining us online from Montreal is NULMAN. He's a Montreal-based comic legend. Andy is the co-founder and the CEO of Play the Future Incorporation, a forward-thinking digital platform and brand engagement tool that converts the big data points and events of major brands into consumer engagement and entertainment. Andy is also the co-founder for Just for Laughs Comedy Festival. Andy been featured on Startup Canada's podcast and was the recipient of I can't pronounce that. I'll try. Lifetime Achievement Award for Quebec. Also, we have another guest who's joining us today from the office is Frederic Voyer. He's the co-founder and the CEO of Swap with AAA, a company that deals with matchmaking services for business and entrepreneurs. Frederic is also a long-time volunteer with Startup Canada. Welcome to you too.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And to those of you joining us via live broadcast or streaming, remember you can ask questions at any time using the hashtag StartupLive on Twitter or by commenting on the Facebook Live video, and we'll try to answer them or ask them to our guests. So I do have a question to start off. Andy, you've been described as the king of comedy in Quebec, and now you're an entrepreneur. Can you tell us what are the parallels between entrepreneurship and comedy?
Oh, God. Who described me as that, first of all? King of comedy in Quebec. Oh, that's what you described me as? Jeez, I've got to be like the king of poutine in Quebec. I don't even know the comedy. But anyway, I'll take, Jesus, it's an old title, but wow. So you've shaken me with that one, so I got to get back to the question. There was, but I got to tell you, even when I was doing Just for Laughs, which I'm not anymore, it was all entrepreneurial. It was every day, it was a challenge. I used to say at Just for Laughs during the festival, every day is a year. And you start the day at 8:30 in the morning and you go till 3:30 in the morning. And when you sit back at the end of the day, you say to yourself, what just went on? Well, the same thing with any startup business. There's no business I've been involved in where you come to the office in the morning and 5 o'clock you look at your watch and say, oh, it's time to go. And what a routine day. There's no routine day. So basically, it really is the same thing. Whether you're running a comedy festival, running a startup like Play the Future, running one like you guys do. There's always the unexpected. There's always stuff you have to deal with, stuff you have to react to that you never thought was going to happen. So, it really is the same thing. Just somehow, on one hand, it's comedy, on the other hand, it's playing the future.
Thank you. My question is now to Frederick in the office. So we were talking before going live about the fact that you're an accountant. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting to see an accountant who's also a founder in a business, because that combo is not really, it's not very common. So you have been involved in the corporate financial setting. What kind of motivated you to go into entrepreneurship and to found your own business?
That's right. I do get that surprise sometimes when people find out that I'm actually a chartered accountant. They would have thought I was head of sales or something like that, which is what I am doing now as CEO of Swap.com and co-founder. But I'd say there's a lot of parallels with especially the training that I had as, in my previous career as an accountant. It really made me focus on the bottom line and always making sure I've got my eye on the numbers, right? And whether, the cash coming in is higher than the cash going out, which is important if you want to have sustainability and continue in the future. So there was a lot of parallels, and as an accountant or somebody working in management consultant, which I did at PricewaterhouseCoopers, I got to work with hundreds, if not thousands, of different organizations and executives in those, and it really gave me that sort of comfort when I started working with executives at that level that, hey, it seems like, this is something interesting to me, and I really envision myself being in their shoes, and so I could always envision myself being in the shoes of these clients I had, and so eventually, when the opportunity was right, and when the idea of Swap came, I knew, it's the right time to go into business for myself, and found a great co-founder, and then the rest is history, as they say.
I just want to add something, is that I'm actually a biochemist, and I'm finishing my degree in chemical engineering, so I have nothing to do with tech entrepreneurship at all, but I'm involved in this. So I usually see entrepreneurship as a bug. Once you have it inside you, you can get it out. Yeah, and I got that bug, although I am a chemical engineer.
Well, congratulations for getting into this
Thank you.
Crazy startup world. That's awesome. Yeah. It's exciting.
It takes you away. So I want to ask Andy, has there ever been a point where you, on your startup journey, were going along and then you completely ran out of money? And if that was the case, what did you do?
Well, it sounds like my first date with my wife, yes.
Okay.
Completely ran out of money, and basically I asked her to pay. Amazingly, she said yes. But as an entrepreneur, I don't think you get to the point where one day you just wake up and say, whoa, look at this, we have no money today. You see it coming. And if you don't see it coming, you're not much of an entrepreneur. But I got to tell you, we've been down the road, in my current business. It's at Airborne Mobile, which we didn't even talk about, because Airborne Mobile was, in between Just for Laughs and Play the Future. Airborne Mobile was, a pioneer in the mobile media space. And we started in 1999 when cell phones were, there wasn't even a color screen on them. But in that business, there were a couple times where we said, geez, if something doesn't happen within the next 2-3 weeks, we're gone. I mean, the company is closed. So, I don't think you ever get to the point where suddenly you're walking along something, bam, you hit a wall and say, what just happened? Where did the money go? If that's the case, somebody is, swindling you or, stealing from you. You see it coming. Usually, anybody half decently intelligent knows their burn rate or run rate or whatever your rate is, but you see it coming. If you don't, you're in way bigger trouble. And if you do see it coming, well, obviously you have to plan for that.
So what did you do with Airborne?
Well, the Airborne, there were a couple times I remember coming home and saying, look, if this doesn't happen, we're going to have to, sell the house, send the kids to work, and I'm not even joking about that. But what happened was, you do two things. You do what it takes to get things done, and then you do what it takes to get things done. It's really that simple. Those are the only two things you do. Once you run out of options, you find more options. And that's what we did. So at Airborne, obviously, on one hand, we looked at other investors, and on the other hand, we looked for people we're currently doing business with. And I can tell you maybe later on a story of what we had to do. You know, we were really down to the wire. We called people and said, we'll do anything. It doesn't have to be in our line of business. We'll clean offices, whatever it takes to bring revenue into the company to keep it going. And that's what we did. We didn't clean offices. We just got a lucky break elsewhere, but we were ready to.
Patrick, I don't think this has happened to you since you're the accountant, but have you ever been close where you're running out of your runway?
I have to admit that, yeah, it has happened.
Oh, wow.
In the beginning.
Okay.
But it was, as Andy said, it was planned, right? It was sort of calculated risks where we had sort of multiple irons in the fire, and we were just waiting for one of those to unlock. But I'll give you a bit of a story where the way that I mitigated the fact that we knew we were about to run out of money is that because it was before we'd actually figured out the right business model for swap.com and really figured out, you know, you put $1 in, you get $3 out. Well, it takes time to get to that point, especially when you're building a marketplace. And so you have to make sure that you really mitigated those risks. And so how we did that is I actually gave up my apartment. I used to live downtown Ottawa, a nice apartment. I was, you know, a management consultant doing quite well, but, you know, I wasn't challenged anymore. And so my co-founder, who already owns his own home, he's our sort of wizard developer, him and I wanted to start this business, and I kind of looked at all the numbers and looked at our cash flow forecast and realized the only way we can keep this going indefinitely and sustainably is if I give up my apartment, my job, and I move into your basement. So let's go sit down with your wife and have a chat. And she eventually, you know, she agreed. She had faith in both of us. And yeah, essentially I moved in with him. We built the basement up. Him and I just grabbed our tools and, you know, built up an entire basement to keep costs low. So it's all about bootstrapping as long as you can, always keeping an eye on your cash flow and making sure that you have a plan for the worst case scenario, meaning no money coming in. For us, we had savings. We had some luck with initial private investors, and so we knew exactly what our burn rate was. And with me living with him, it was a couple $1,000 a month kept us going. And so at the end of the day, like Andy mentioned, you do what you have to do, right? And if you know you're about to run out of money, we started, you know, doing different types of contracts. You know, we fell back on what we knew how to do and were good at, which was, you know, consulting, training, do sales and marketing training on the side, web development contracts. You do everything you can to get to the point where, you know, you are financially sustainable, and then you can start investing in growth. So it's a process.
I really like the fact that you mentioned you took calculated risk, just not any risk, but you actually thought about the consequences. Mm-hmm. Why do you think businesses or startups actually run out of money? What goes wrong in the process that they actually run out of money?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why businesses go out of, you know, bankrupt. But I think a big one is there's 3 pillars really that I follow, and it's, you know, to have success, you need to first be solving a real problem. So a lot of companies fail to actually identify a real problem out there in the market, and they don't really properly validate whether or not people are willing to pay for that problem to be solved. And so that's the first thing that some companies get wrong. Another thing is poor cash flow management. A lot of companies maybe don't have the financial expertise as part of the founder team, and so they're maybe a bit too optimistic. They're maybe just investing. I've heard the expression, you know, I want you to be losing money every month because that means you're reinvesting in growth. But unless you've got already a formula to, you know, convert that cash into more dollars, well, you can only do that for so long until you hit a wall. And then, you know, you bring in an investor or you can get grants. But so that's the second biggest one. And the third biggest reason I see companies, you know, running out of money or, you know, even if they have the money raised and they're managing it properly and they've identified a real problem, is that they don't have the right team. So I think if you build a strong team, you solve a real problem, and you're managing your cash properly, it's going to be hard for you run out of money. And as long as you remain flexible, as Annie mentioned, in terms of what you're willing to do to get cash in, then I think you'll do well. You just have to have perseverance.
If I can add something to that, I'm going to look at the situation we're in now at Play the Future. In our first year, we just had to prove to people that we're doing something of merit. We did it in Canada. Then we had to say, well, let's see if we can expand it to the States, which we have. Now we're launching globally very shortly, which is kind of a scoop, but that's a whole other ballgame. But we have right now. I mean, there's if you really want to look at it, if you're a digital person, the 1-0. If you're a visual person, it's a rock on standing on a precipice or something, and it depends how things fall. So we call it the domino theory, and we try to push over. We have numerous dominoes, and you can't believe the amount of dominoes we have right now stacked up, and we're trying to push them. All we need is one to fall in our favor, and we're cool. But we're just waiting for that one to, and you cannot believe. But again, one of these falls and we're home free. But if they don't, what happens? 6, 7, 8, 9 months from now, I don't know. But that's really the nature of any business I was involved in. There were always these dominoes where you have to push. And you have to say, wow, this is going to be a game changer. And sometimes it's just one client that's the difference between success and failure. It's one person saying yes instead of no. And really, that's what all startups live for, is the next yes. And that's what we got to get to every time.
You bring up a really good point. I was mentoring a startup last week or a few weeks ago, and the founders, they were just like, oh, we're going to wait for this to happen and then we'll go on to the next step. And I was like, no, you have to do everything at the same time, because otherwise it's just going to take such a long time. You're going to run out of money, and then you're going to not be able to go anywhere. But do everything at the same time. Hopefully someone will say yes, and then you can push forward.
That's right.
Yeah, so it kind of comes to my next point. What are the things you can do to cut costs and manage your money better so that you can elongate your runway? I know you probably are the counting.
Can I go first?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously a big one is lowering your fixed expenses every month. You take my example. I'm assuming a lot of people that are watching are maybe trying to get into business right now, or they're looking forward to giving it a go and not 100% sure how to go about it yet from a financial perspective. So big thing, lower your monthly expenses to the bare minimum. Move in with your business partner if you have to. If you're able to, move in with your parents. If I was a bit younger and had that interest, that's the solution I would have used for sure. And have an eye on your burn rate. So what's the minimum amount of money that you need to come in every single month for you to be able to keep going at knocking on doors, putting up those dominoes until one of those guys falls, and then the chain reaction and then momentum turns on. And so really lower those expenses, make an actual budget. I know everybody's told that by their accountant or whoever, their teachers, but actually sit down and make a real budget. And what I do is I split it between fixed and variable expenses. And so keep that number as low as possible. Do the same for your co-founder or whoever else is absolutely required to get the ball rolling with the business, to figure out the right business model. And then again, look at all the subscriptions that you're using or the tools that you're using. Ask yourself, do we need to spend money on this month, right? Come up with a very big minimum budget, and then have a budget that's a bit more optimal. And the goal being, the second you're doing better, you can start to go into this more optimal budget where you've got a bit more marketing and sales dollars to spend. Because, it's hard to make money without spending money sometimes, but you do have to get going. And so move in with your business partner if you can.
That's your biggest tip.
But convince his wife. That's the hard part.
Who mentioned that the entrepreneurship is like a bug before?
Media.
So I want to go back to that, because what Frederick said was really, to the point and very incredibly rational and correct. I want to take another standpoint from this and look at this. You mentioned before it's like a bug. I see a business sometimes as if you have cancer. And again, let's look at this. I'm not being facetious or silly, but if you're somebody who has cancer and you say, well, how am I going to run the rest of my life? Am I going to try and elongate it as much as I can to the point where I say, well, I'm going. Let's see if I can get another month out of this, but the quality of life is down. Or you're going to say, you know what? I'm taking a shot. I'm taking a shot at an experimental drug or an experimental therapy that may kill me, but it may completely give me 10, 12 years of life. And that's why I see a lot of businesses. Because many times you can say, if you're looking specifically at run, burn, at that rate, you say, well, you know what, if I cut here and skip there a little bit, I can give myself an extra 4 months. But in the end, what will those extra 4 months give you if all you're doing is basically you're scraping, really scraping the bottom of the barrel to try and find something? Or you say, you know what, right now we're going for broke. We're going for broke because in the end, I'd rather, die today, a happy man, than die 6 months from now a miserable man. At least I know I took the shot. So again, there's that turning point in business too. You say, you know what, I'm going for it now because of the fact that this may be the domino that topples it over and puts us, on the right track. Or so what? So it's 3 months of sustainability that I went ahead and I sacrificed for this shot. But that's a big decision, and as a startup, it's a decision you have to make. As Frederick mentioned before, it's something. If you have a good co-founders, a good founding team, you'll have that, and you'll say, let's go for it. And obviously your investors have to come along for the ride as well. But sometimes it's better to say, you know what, let's stop skimping and let's go for it, but do it intelligently.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Andy's saying here, and it's all about, having a plan at least of what you are going to do, because, there's no point in extending the runway, but continuing to do the same thing that's not working, right? What is it Einstein said, the definition of, I guess, stupidity is trying to get different results by doing the same thing over and over again. And so I completely agree. I mean, sometimes you just have to say, let's go for broke. And sometimes you're going to end up doing that multiple times. But hopefully you've got a plan so that the very worst case scenario doesn't mean you're out on the street, and owing hundreds of thousands to creditors. So that's what I've tried to mitigate at all times. But
let me pick up on that, because sometimes, when I was at Just for Laughs, and it's actually something we talk about here at Play the Future all the time, what is the worst case scenario? What is the worst case scenario? Is the worst case scenario saying, hey, you know what, guess what, that didn't work, and let's move on to something else in life? If you can live with that, then that's not too bad. I remember at Just for Laughs, we said this all the time. And I had a very young team, and we would take some pretty big risks. I said, guys, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario, you all get fired. You're 25 years old. You're 26 years old. You have this under your belt. Do you think you're not going to find another job? Do you think you're never going to get hired again? Do you think you'll be unemployed forever? Of course not. But if you can live with the fact that you may get fired tomorrow and be completely cut off from this, if you can live with that, then let's go. And that's what, and every one of them said, let's do it, because of the fact that the win was so much greater than the risk of the loss. They said, okay, what's going to happen? I'm going to be, perpetually unemployed. That's my last job is at 26. Of course not. But it's easy to say here, sitting on, in front of a camera. It may not be that easy to say when you're sitting in an office, but we do that here all the time. It's, guys, let's just keep pushing. Let's keep pushing to do something great. And if it fails, that's life. Frederick, you can talk. I'm sure we all can talk about great failures we've had, and we laugh at now. It's painful then, but many times those failures. And I don't want to cliche this, but many times those failures clear a path to something you've never found before. So if you kept on sticking things out, in a rut. So there we go.
That's amazing.
I have to say there we go, because or something like that, so you'll know when I'm finished talking. So unlike Frederick, I'm not in the studio, so like.
My next question is more technical. I know it's the experience of Frederick, but I would actually like you, Andy, to answer first. Because if he's going to start talking, probably we're not going to stop, because it's his field. But what tools do you think exist out there that you use or that you know of that help entrepreneurs kind of track all the expenses and revenue and cost
I have two great tools. One's called Alyssa Kovac. The other's called Parissa Foster. Parissa is my co-founder and partner. Alyssa handles all our books. And if I'm telling you, they are to the penny. They know exactly where we are at every point in time and every day. They don't use anything sexy. They'll use a spreadsheet. They'll use QuickBooks. They'll use stuff that's commercially available. It's not rocket science. It's really easy. Frederick said that before. It's so simple. Out versus in. If you keep having more out than in, you're not going to be there for a long time. But that's really it. It's truly, that's the simplest. Frankly, tracking all this is the simplest part. The toughest part is bringing it in.
Yeah.
I know you're the spreadsheet guy.
Yeah, well, I definitely make use of some tools, right? Like Excel, QuickBooks is one that we use. It's definitely, as Andy mentioned, I rely on some of my key team members that have that eye on, on the expenses, and myself. I've always got my mind on our bottom line and on our bank account, whereas I see it as my CTO and co-founder, he's always got his eye on the development and development life cycle. So I'm like money life cycle. My co-founder is product and development life cycle, and so I think that's why it really works for us, because we deal with thousands of entrepreneurs, just like Startup Canada does, and one thing I keep hearing is lots of people trying to do it by themselves, and it's overwhelming, right? You're trying to build a product, trying to build out a market, you're trying to keep an eye on your finances, you're trying to keep money coming in, you're maybe trying to raise money from private sources, so it's too much, I think, to do all at once. You need to leverage people, leverage tools like QuickBooks. I think is great, actually. I use it monthly, so it's definitely leverage tools out there. Those are my two main ones.
I think the two of you actually both came up to the same point, is that find a co-founder who's an accountant. They have some education in finance.
Is that your next step?
Well, you need a well-balanced team.
I guess so. I'm going to go to School of Finance.
But Parissa is far from an accountant. She's just, she's learned the value and taken it on herself as president of the company to make sure that she understands it. Frederick before quoted from Einstein. I'd like to also give a quote from a great man, Snoop Dogg. and really, Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, who said famously, "Got my mind on my money and my money on my mind."
I love it.
And that's really what you have to do, because if you don't know where you're at, you're going to have a hard fall. So, luckily, Parissa is somebody who keeps me in line to say, hey, whoa, what's going on here? And do we really need to spend that? And, hey, we have a little bit extra. Well, let's up the spend in this way. Let's invest in this. Okay, great. But it really is not being ignorant to the dollar figure. Not that necessarily you have to understand, cash flow and things to that effect, but you need to have somebody who does. And, never forget the dollar. And again, we're talking about what happens when you run out of money. One that we should do a show, what happens when you have a shitload of money. We should do that type of show. Like, wow, oh my God, it's coming in like crazy. We should do that type of show. But,
next episode?
That happens too. I can't wait to see it. Startup Canada Live. So we have a shitload of money. What to do next?
I think they're taking notes aside.
Yeah. So I know both of you were talking about the people on your team that have helped you out. What if you hit really hard times, and how do you know when it's time to let them go or where you have to make cuts? You can start answering that one.
Sure. Sometimes you get to some points in your business if things haven't gone as planned, and you do have to make some tough decisions. At the end of the day, it's going to vary based on who that person is, what their role is, how much they're costing. But I would suggest, I'm assuming your audience is a lot of young startups. Am I correct to assume that?
It's young, mid-level.
Young, middle. So,
other than me, yes, that's their audience. Other than me, that is their audience.
Hey, you're totally in our audience.
I mean, one big part is, I would say, for your co-founders is make sure that you're willing to go as far as the other person is, right? Have that really important discussion in the beginning of what happens if everything goes wrong? You know, what are we going to do then? And my co-founder and I had that discussion where we, you know, again, that's one of the reasons that I moved in with him early on. Thankfully, I no longer have to live in his basement. You know, things have gotten better, and was able to get an apartment again. But you know, have that discussion of what's the worst case scenario. And for us, it was like we're flat broke, but I'll be in your basement, and we'll continue to go. And he was working. He kept his job, and he became part-time and then full-time when I said, okay, it makes sense from a financial perspective now. But thankfully, we've never had to get to that point yet where we have to say, okay, sorry, this person is not the right fit. But I have had to do that in my previous roles, and it's, you know, some difficult conversations have to be had, but I mean, it is still a business, and if someone isn't pulling their weight, or, you know, if keeping one person on board means that, you know, everybody's gone within a month or two because of poor cash flow, well then you have to pick the lesser of two evils, which is, you know, let one person go so everybody else can continue on. But again, I would say until you've really hit the right business model, hire slowly and carefully, because the first few people that come in are the most important, and they really have to share the vision. As Andy mentioned, you know, you had that open discussion with your team saying, hey guys, what's the worst that can happen? You know, is it really that bad if you're out and without a job next week? You're young, you can get another job. And so having them all on board and on the same sort of mindset of I'm willing to do anything that it takes to be successful, that is the key to success, I think. One of them is having a bunch of people that think like you.
Okay, but I've got a question. What about for our older entrepreneurs? There's a lot of people who are older that are now getting into entrepreneurship. When would they, like, you know, cut costs, maybe scale down, or like let that member go of their team?
You think that there's no difference. A business is a business. Let's look at it. I remember one of the things one of the few things I learned in university is that a corporation is a living, breathing entity. You know, so whether it's young or old, people running it, I think it's irrelevant. I think what's more relevant is where the business is at. Like, to me, what's important is, you know, the opportunity. If you give me a choice, you say, would you rather have a business that's run out of money, but man, you have a ton of opportunity. You're waiting for something to happen. So maybe you'll go out of the salary for, you know, a couple months, but you know you're right on the edge of something happening, versus a business where you're flush with capital and you say, well, we don't really know what to do, and there's nothing really. So you'll go ahead and piss it away. And I've seen that so often where people will spend money for the sake, you know, of spending it because they have it. Look, when people look at Play the Future, we're 6 people, and people, you know, our clients, like, sometimes they flip out when they say you're doing all this. You have, you know, a worldwide launch, and you're 24/7, and you know, you're doing something, you know, every day, and you're in 2 languages, and you're 6 people. Yeah, because we all do what we got to do and do things that we didn't do before. But again, we're keeping things really tight as an entrepreneur, whether you're young or old. But I've been in companies where it's just, you know, I remember the days at Airborne when we had a ton of money and we were just hiring. I remember at Airborne we had somebody whose job it was to file phones, because we had so many different phones back in the day. We were developing for so many different phones. And her gig was she took phones and filed them. And then, you know, when somebody needed a phone, they went to her. She was like the librarian of phones. Now that's, you know, when you got a lot of capital, when you have, you know, a phone filer. You know. So it's irrelevant, young entrepreneur, old entrepreneur. Sure, you know, I'm looking at myself. You know, I've been down the road, but still, an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. You know, we live for the fact that and it's always like that sweet misery, the sweet misery of being an entrepreneur, of the, you know, that feeling in the pit of your stomach, and you know that's going to go away sometime too. But you also know that the joy you feel sometimes is going to go away pretty fast as well. So if you can deal with that, you know, it doesn't matter what age. It's you know, it's just the entrepreneurial spirit.
So a business regardless of the age of the founders.
Awesome.
But how about financial stability in startups? I don't know if you, Frederick, if you want to start the answer. Are there any rules around financial stability? Do you think there's any specific magic recipe to financial stability in startups?
Well, as we talked about, really it comes down to a basic formula, right? Is that money coming in should be higher than money coming out. And that's, you know, pluses and minuses, right? Just keeping, it's all about, like Snoop's quote, keeping your mind on your money, right? It's really, you've got to look at it. I think some people just maybe by fear of what they're going to see, maybe avoid looking at the numbers until it's a little too late, or they just keep piling on receipts, and you know, by the time they bring it to someone that knows what they're doing, an accountant, they add it up and say, okay, well, you're out of business. So I think it's, you know, it's that's the main rule, right? Money coming in should be higher than money going out, and if it isn't, well, figure out a way to bring money in. Is it through getting some private investors? I mean, they, you know, friends and family are one of the first places to go look for money in the startup world for a reason, right? These are people that trust you, and they may not necessarily need to see that what you're working on is already sort of, you know, spitting out checks, and so they'll have more faith in you. They'll be willing to give you money a bit earlier on. Then you can start going out after government grants. We leveraged government grants in the beginning. We had private investments from friends that really had excess capital that they could afford to lose in case things didn't work out. And, you know, we laid it out on the table for them. Here's all the risks. And so there's government grants. And then ideally you're making money from customers, right? You know, the investors and then the grants, they're almost just, they buy you time to figure out how you're actually going to get customers to take money out of their pocket and put it into yours because you're solving a problem for them. So that's the key. That's really what you need to have your eye on, is how, you know, what is this problem that I'm solving? Is it big enough that there's a big enough market of people willing to pay me for it? And, you know, then let's get to work once you figure that formula out. And then keep your eye on the bottom line. Andy, I'm not sure, you know, I'm sure you've got things to add here.
We've got government grants, unfortunately, from the government of Albania, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, wow.
There's no Albanians watching, and now I'm going to be Trumpized because I said something against Albania. It was a joke, folks. But yeah, you know, it's really, you know, it's a simple equation. You know, as I said, the tough part is always bringing the money in, no matter what. Because again, you know, you may have the greatest customer in the world, but I think one of the biggest problems I've seen in business is when people just say, whew, and they say, okay, it's time, we can take it easy now because it's all just rolling in, things are happening. You know, I've seen this happen so often where somebody's dependent on a customer. Sometimes a big customer, and then the customer says, hey, guess what? Somebody else gave me a better deal. Or guess what? We're out of business. And what just happened? So you can never get comfortable. And again, you know, when money is not coming in, unsettling. When money is coming in, it should be equally as unsettling because you're saying, okay, how do I make sure that it continues to come in? And how do I make sure I don't just rest on my laurels and say, oh, I don't have to worry about this anymore because it's flowing in? You always have to worry. So, like, you know, again, I'm looking at your screen there. So you ran out of the money. What to do next? It's just always so. It should say so money. What to do next? And just always got to make sure that it's coming in, and never rest on your laurels. You know, never get too down, never get too up. Always keep fighting to make sure that it comes in.
I completely agree, and actually something we didn't mention that is another key formula is collecting, right? That's super important. You know, revenue doesn't equal cash. You know, you could have landed a contract, it's signed, you know, you've started doing work for the customer, but if your payment plans aren't optimized, and you know, let's say you tell the client, I'll collect everything after I'm done, well, you're covering that for however many months it's going to take the customer to pay you. So collection is super important, right? I spend some of my time early on, you know, chasing customers to get the checks. That's also important, right? But
that's really good to know, because I don't think a lot of people think about that.
It is a big part, right? Depending on what type of business you're in. Obviously, if people are buying your product just online, it's a bit simpler where, you know, they pay and then they get it. But let's say you're in the consulting business or
B2B.
Yeah, B2B. I mean, I'll give you an example. For us at Swap, what we do really is we bring small businesses customers on a silver platter who might not have the size of a team yet to have a strong sales and marketing arm. And so we bring them new customers and help them land and close leads. And I was actually speaking to a customer a couple of days ago who has a manufacturing plant, and he makes a couple of million a year, but what he told me is, I've only got 4 customers. So the second I lose a customer, I'm losing 25% of my bottom line. Wow. So I want to start getting some smaller clients, but that can help me sustain myself if there was ever something that was to happen with one of my customers. So another part is, don't rely too much on, as Andy mentioned, just one customer or 2 customers, because you never know what's going to happen with their business, right? Lots of companies go out of business, and so if you haven't collected yet and you've just got a big accounts payable sitting in your books and that company goes bankrupt, well, good luck seeing that cash. So collect early, have good payment terms where there's a deposit up front, and then some milestones attached to other payments. That's a really important point.
So
and make friends with people in the mafia. That has helped me out immensely in terms of collection. You just send some people, over there and say, "Listen,
they have interesting skill sets that could help."
Listen, as Frederick said, you got to do what you got to do. Someone has the money, you got to get it back, or at least a piece of that business or their car, something. You can't.
Okay, cover your ears, everyone. So you talked about collecting, and we also talked about bootstrapping, and you talked a little bit about grants, right? So what are some ways startups can find money that they probably don't know about, like grants, other items, and specifically where can they get them?
Sure. Do you want me to go first? Yeah. I could speak for ourselves. We've leveraged a couple of grants already. Because we're in Ontario, there's Employment Ontario. They have a couple of really small startup grants for people that want to start their own companies and maybe working on it full time. But here you're talking a couple of thousands of dollars. Then other grants that we accessed was the National Research Council. They're great, especially if you're doing something in the research and development area. You can access IRAP funding, which is Industrial Research and Assistance Program. They've got funding available to companies that are doing something innovative and that are investing in research and development.
And that's a national program, right?
That's a national program. Okay. That's right. Whereas the Employment Ontario, that's obviously a provincial program. So I myself, in the beginning of the business, I looked at I did a lot of research online and looked at the Corporations Canada website. They've got a section about funding in Canada. We are lucky in Canada where the government does have a lot of different programs available to startups who are able to show that they have a good business model and they know what they're going to do with their money. There's also Futurepreneur. That's another program, futurepreneur.ca, where I believe they'll give a company up to $15,000 loan. And if you need more, they can tack on, I think, the BDC for another $45,000. There's the Ontario Centers of Excellence, Smart Start Seed Funding. There's a lot of programs out there available to Canadians, especially if you're under 30. There's the youth program. So I would say go online and just search and apply. Don't be afraid. Even if you might think you're not meeting the criteria, apply anyways. You're not losing anything. In the beginning, we definitely use grants to get going.
We live in a great country that, and each province has its own as well. So not just national, but provincial have their programs to start businesses and get young people not just working, but creating jobs. It's amazing, and I speak to my friends in the States, and they're astonished at the level of involvement, positive involvement from both federal and provincial, and also municipal government affairs. But one other thing I want to bring up, like I'm on the board of Startup Fest in Montreal, and that event is, you were talking about grants, but that event really mixes entertainment and entrepreneurship, finance, all this rolled into one, because there's so many people there looking for businesses to give money to, and governments are there as well, like the BDC and so many other government arms are there, but it's in such a non-threatening way, because usually rather than filling out forms, you're standing and talking to someone over a beer and discussing your business and how they can help bring money to the table. So it's a great event, and that's one. But I'm sure there are plenty of others across the country as well, where it becomes more of a social thing, and it's not as how would you put it, as clinical as just filling out a form, but it's also getting to look somebody in the eye and talk to them about business and about where the money can come from.
Yeah, those are great points, and I'm actually, my co-founder and I are going to Startup Fest in 2 weeks,
cool.
So really looking forward to it. So maybe we'll get to meet each other there, actually. Andy.
1,000%. I'll be the
awesome
the guy looking for money. No, I'll be.
So 100% recommend Startup Fest, definitely. Yeah. Can't wait to go there.
I've been there. There's people from all over the country that come. Mm-hmm. It's outside at the water in Montreal. A good place to be.
Yeah, definitely. We're excited. A little break from the startup grind,
Yeah.
So you both talked about so many different things, from moving into your founder's basement, or applying to funds and grants. How could entrepreneurs stay focused on actually delivering the value of their business when money becomes an issue?
Sorry, maybe I'll let Andy take this one.
Okay.
I've started all of them.
No, not in the least. But money is always an issue, as I mentioned before. It's never not an issue. And if you think that it stops becoming an issue, you're wrong. So as I mentioned before, even when it's coming in, when it's flowing in like your, what's his name, Noriega, and it's just coming in, pouring in through your windows, it's still an issue. It's still an issue. So money is always, and if you don't understand that, then get out of entrepreneurship. Go take a job. It's always an issue. So if you have to be able to do one of two things: A, compartmentalize your thinking, or B, say this is what I do and that's what you do to your some of your co-founders, your partners, or your colleagues. See, this is what you do. Make sure I know what's going on, but I'm taking care of this. And it's not that hard to do. We've done that. I mean, basically every business I'm in. I remember when I was in with Garner Bornstein, we did Airborne Mobile. We said we were a very psychological partnership. He's logical and I'm psycho, and that's but it sounds silly, but it wasn't. Garner was the money guy. Garner was the investment guy. Garner was the guy who would go to the banks. I was the guy who made the deals, who spoke in public, who did I was the sort of the face, and he was the brains of it, and the partnership worked out really, really well. But that's the way you got. But it was always. Money was always an issue, and you always had to to think about it. But you had to run a business, so
Mm-hmm. I actually completely agree with that. If you think money, let's say you raise a big round and you get a couple of $1 million. Should you now think, hey, we've made it and money is no longer an issue? No, because I think that's the wrong mindset. You should always want to get the most out of every dollar that you spend or that you make, because you're always in the market competing with other players and trying to get the most out of the market share that you're trying to own in the space that you're trying to own. And it's funny, my co-founder and I were having a discussion a couple of days ago about this in preparation for this talk. And in the beginning for us, especially early on, we had an offer from a VC firm who wanted to acquire 51% of our company for $500,000, and we ended up not taking that deal.
Good.
And a big reason was because we realized we're too early to raise money from VCs. They're trying to get a piece before we actually were really making money out of our business model, and so sometimes it's better to just take the money that you need to get to the next sort of milestone that you can hit, where you can actually now have more leverage and negotiate better deals. And so money is always on my mind, and it is always an issue in a sense. It's just, in a way, to go back to what my co-founder and I were talking about, we think that the fact that we didn't raise a bunch of money in the beginning and that we bootstrapped actually gave us the right mindset to continue to grow our business and to be sustainable no matter how much money we're going to raise. Because now we're at a much better point than we were, and we are going to be doing a big round very soon because now we can command, the right deal based on the metrics we have. But, I never want to lose that mindset of wanting to squeeze everything out of every single dollar. And I think had we had a bunch of money to lie on in the beginning, we wouldn't be as sharp right now. We wouldn't be as careful with every dollar. And, there's lots of stories, as Andy mentioned, of companies raising big rounds, having a bunch of money, and going bankrupt a couple of years down the road because they didn't work on the foundation that's the most important, which is the business model, right? Is it making sense? Lots of companies nowadays being, funneled a bunch of money where they haven't yet figured out how they're going to actually make money, right? So every month they require more money coming in from an investor to keep going. So that's never a good position to be in.
So back on the point where you don't really have any money left and you your business model is not working out and you have to shut down. How do you, do you have to go pay back those loans? How do you go back and do that?
Well, so everyone has a different risk appetite, right? I had an entrepreneur asking me for...
and what if you can't pay back?
Well, exactly. So I had a chat with an entrepreneur a couple of weeks ago who told me, Fred, I just quit my job. I'm ready to do this. My co-founder and I are going to work on this full time. We're just about to get, I think it was over $50,000 in loans. And I said, okay, hold on. What is the idea? And I realized it hadn't been validated. Really, they were just at the beginning with an idea, and they were already willing to go out and get themselves in complete debt. And so that is scary to me because they hadn't really mitigated that yet. So really, loans are really hard, especially in the beginning when you have nothing to, essentially, back that loan up with. So generally it's a personal loan, essentially, when you're raising money, even if it's a corporation. So be really careful about how you go about raising money in the beginning. Bootstrap, right? Build an MVP, minimum viable product on the cheap. Really validate before you start getting yourself in debt.
Yeah.
It's a big piece.
So Andy, if you can't pay off that loan, what do you do?
It's called identity theft. Basically, you just become somebody else and you walk away.
I don't know if I can have you back. Oh my God. Joking.
I'm telling you, this is what happens when you've been in business for a long time. You have all these answers that are kind of not textbook. What do you do? I mean, look, luckily, we've never had to really rely on loans, but the world is filled with stories of people who've had to give up their homes, and as I did at Airborne, we were that close. But that's the way life goes. And what you just do is you realize that tomorrow the sun will rise again, and you have to do the same thing: get up and deal with it. If you're making a commitment, to an investor that you're going to try the hardest you can to ensure that investor, he, she, or they gets a return on their investment. When it's a loan, you're taking a loan, you're making a commitment to pay it back. If you can't pay it back, you have to sell your home. If you have no home to sell and there's nothing to back it up, you go bankrupt. What else can you do? You're not going to kill yourself, but you're making a commitment. You have to live up to your commitments. And the worst thing you can do in business is not live up to your commitments. And that will kill you for the next thing you want to do. Living up to your commitments will always keep you afloat and keep you in people's good stead. But I noticed we talked quotes before. We talked Einstein, Snoop Dogg, and I've been watching the Twitter feed, and it's funny what people pick up. It makes me laugh. But there's one great quote that I got to give that my friend, former partner and current partner investor in his business, Rory Olson, once told me. And this is after we raised a lot of money at Airborne, and he said, a brilliant quote: "Whom the gods want to destroy, they will provide unlimited funds." And that always stuck with me. Whom the gods want to destroy, they will provide unlimited funds. And as what Frederick said before about bootstrapping, no matter what, it's, you have to respect the dollar. Even, again, as I said before, if it's flowing in like, like you're some drug dealer, you have to respect the dollar. As soon as you lose that respect for the dollar is when problems happen. So that's, back to Rory's quote, to whom the gods want to destroy, they provide unlimited funds. And I've seen it so often where people have just, raised a huge round, or, there's money coming and they lose focus. They lose focus and they think that it's going to be like this forever. Well, it ain't going to be. And that's really, if you respect that dollar and treat it with reverence, you'll be okay the rest of your life, even if you have to close up shop, because then you live up to your commitments. But no investor goes in and says, "Oh, this is a sure thing," and they all understand that there's a risk. But as long as you're showing commitment, and you'll never be called out on that. Live up to your commitments and respect the dollar.
Well, I do know we have a few Twitter questions and not that much time left, so we'll take the first question. Andy, you said your team is so small. How would you get so productive and successful with such a small team?
Well, basically, you do what has to get done. You don't look at the hours in the day. You don't look at the days in the week. You look at what you've committed to, and you say, I have to deliver what I committed to, no matter how long it takes. And then if you realize, well, I cannot deliver what I committed to, cut back on your commitments. But remember, this is a small team. When we started, Just for Laughs was a small team. We started Airborne. There were like two of us. It was Garner and myself. But Airborne grew to 100 people at one point in time. We were an international company doing over $35 million in revenue, and that's in 2002, 2003, many moons ago. So you grow with it, and that's not to say when we were 100 we were fat. Every person had that same mentality of living up to the commitment and making sure that you can always deal with it. So right now we make sure that we strain ourselves to the point of living up to what we say we are going to do to this team size, and we will either have to A, increase team size, which I think is coming, or B, make sure that we don't overcommit. It's really a simple equation.
Okay. Do we have any other Twitter questions? You say to keep your dollars on your mind. How often in a month or a year should you be checking your finances? This is definitely directed to you.
So again, right, I can speak from my own experience. I have my mind on my bank statement, business bank statement at all times, right? My co-founder will often ask me like, "Oh, how much money do we have right now?" And, "Oh, can I buy this?" So I act as CEO, but also CFO, and it's really go on your online banking and look at how much money you have in there, and daily you should have an idea if your role is you bringing in the money and keeping an eye on the finances. You should always have your mind on that and know what's coming in the pipeline in terms of customer dollars, or if you're waiting on investors to, doing investment rounds, you should have a plan how much you're trying to raise, right? Or, how much you're trying to get from grants. Like, I've got plans, 12 to 18 months ahead of time of what grants I'm going to get, which customers are we planning on going for. I've essentially got a pipeline full of dominoes, as Andy mentioned, some of which will fall and some of which won't. But always make sure that you've got, plan A, plan B, plan C, of what's going to happen if the cash isn't coming with plan A. Well, then there's plan B, plan C, plan D. So to answer that question, always, at all times, or else you're going to have a problem. You should never have any surprises, as Andy mentioned, and one day you look at your bank account and, oh my God, we're out of money. That's just the wrong mindset. Always look at it.
I'm the least financially savvy person in this company, and I got to tell you, if you ask me today, how much do we have in the bank, I can tell you, not to the dollar, but real close to the dollar, because as Frederick said, I check it up. It's almost obsessively.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
Definitely, what gets tracked gets managed is another great quote that I like to follow.
You can start.
So thank you, Andy and Frederick, for joining us today. What a great conversation about, so you ran out of money, what do you do next? And our basic thing was, don't get there.
Yeah,
Plan, keep track, organize. So Startup Live is taking a break until August 15th. You can join us then for e-commerce for startups with Rogers for Business. You can register for this event and more at startupcan.ca/events.
You can also stay informed with all the latest events and podcasts by following Startup Canada on all social media platforms. Also, a new hashtag Startup Podcast drops every Tuesday on iTunes, and Startup Canada's live on Periscope and Facebook Live and event stream every Thursday, 12 to 1 Eastern Time. To everyone who joined us today, thank you so much, and happy 150 Canada Day.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Happy
Coming
Canada
up.
Day to you all, yeah.
And thank you to our guests, and to everyone who tuned in. Have an enterprising week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
And I'll see you at Startup.